One of the fascinating things about October 7th is that even our most secular Israeli friends said this is the worst day not in Israeli history but in Jewish history, and the worst day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. We've seen real heroes who are just ordinary folk on October 7th and as I say every day since. Don't let the anti-Semite define the Jew. The Jew defines the Jew. The Zionist defines the Zionist.
Professor Gil Troy, thank you so much for being with us.
Always great to be with you.
And let's talk about this moment we're in, a prospect for peace, a ceasefire that we hope will hold. Lots of question marks surrounding it, but your broad reaction to that?
The biggest headline is that if within 72 hours of an agreement, all the hostages come home, then we all have to say, thank God. And that has become the most important issue for so many Israelis. And while it is also really, really, really important to degrade Hamas and to de-radicalize Gaza, at this point, if we can just end the hostage crisis, we also end any Hamas power over us. And so if that works, that's a huge achievement.
Amazing to think that after so many years of constant rocket fire since the early 2000s on Israel, that could potentially be gone. It's a hope, but it's certainly something that would be an amazing achievement.
Absolutely. Look, this has been a very, very difficult 2 years, but I'm quite proud, first of all, and I know this is not the politically correct position, but of the moral discipline that this army has shown. I'm proud of the degree to which in urban warfare settings, we have made every effort to minimize civilian casualties. And I'm proud of the fact that we are safer today than we were on October 6th. And when I say we, I don't just mean my cousin on the Gaza envelope. I don't just mean those of us living in Israel. I mean those of us in the Western world, because had the jihadis won, and had they done what they wanted to do with their ring of fire on October 7th, the entire Western world would be in a much more difficult crisis than it is today.
Such an important context. As a historian of both Zionism and America, how do you place October the 7th within the broader history of Jewish history, the state of Israel, global history?
So one of the fascinating things about October 7th is that even our most secular Israeli friends said this is the worst day not in Israeli history but in Jewish history, and the worst day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. And that was a fascinating framing because what they saw, and then this is even before, this was happening in real time here in Israel, and then it was even before they realized what was going on American campuses at the Sydney Opera House in the UK. What we saw was how anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism not only merged but reinforced one another, and how anti-Zionism on the whole is just the latest form, the latest iteration, the updated version of the good old-fashioned hatred called anti-Semitism. And we know that anti-Semitism is both the longest hatred and what I call the most plastic hatred. It adopts. We're too right, we're too left, we stand out, we fit in. We're too nationalist, we're too cosmopolitan. And on that day, we just saw the intensity of that hatred. But I think it's also really important, wearing my American history hat, to emphasize that this was a moment where the jihadi movement and Iran thought that they were going to run the table. The fact that they were expecting, that Hamas expected there to be invasion from the north as well, and perhaps in the territories, and then we still ended up with a seven-front war, shows that this is not just an Israeli event. This was an event of world significance.
And in terms of significance to the Israelis, the fact that they were able to push back against those multiple enemies on multiple fronts, something we've never seen before, or certainly haven't seen before in a while.
No, it's stunning. I mean, again, we have to point out the horrible tragedy of the day, and how many, my own kids lost so many close friends just on that day. In the Battle of Peraza, my son lost 5 friends alone. So that we have to be very careful not to be too glib about this. I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying that, when we talk about it, but we step back. The IDF failed that day. The Israeli government failed that day. But Zionism was vindicated that day because the Israeli people had a methodology, an ideology, and experience in defending themselves. And it's actually remarkable that within 24 hours, we had mostly repelled this invasion of 3,500, 4,000 well-trained, well-armed, crazy jihadis, and thousands of other marauders. And that shows a remarkable vindication of the Zionist movement and the Zionist dream. Zionism never promised us that we'd have a rose garden or that we'd have a state al magasha kesef, on a silver platter. But on that day, and every day since, we've seen among the youth, but also among society where 80% were volunteering, where everybody has been not just on a war footing, but in a giving footing, we saw that Zionism continues, and Zionism, of course, has to evolve. But in many ways, I think that October 7th was a day when we realized the power of the Zionist movement and the power also of liberal democracy and the goodness of one side versus the evil of another side.
What's your impression of how Israeli society has changed? On October the 6th, we were in a very different place than we were on October the 8th in many different ways.
So as a historian, I'm kind of stuck in the moment, and I wish I could take your question and go back a year or a year and a half, and then I would talk about how remarkably united Israeli society was, and it would have been a stunning comparison between the ugliness of, let's say, Yom Kippur right before October 7th, Yom Kippur 2023, when in Tel Aviv a service that was supposed to kind of reach out to religious and secular alike was disrupted. And that was a very, very upsetting moment for many people, religious and secular as well.
It was the peak of the
it showed just how tribal things, everybody called it the judicial reform debate, and that was ostensibly the debate. Most people couldn't really get into the technical details. It was a tribal division that was pulling this country apart. Within minutes of the October 7th horrors, we remembered something that I'd been saying again and again in my columns, and I think you had also been pointing out, that we have outside enemies. We united. And for month after month, we had an extraordinary sense of unity. Now, as I said, I'm stuck. I have to be in this 2-year anniversary. And unfortunately, that sense of unity has fallen apart a little bit. But when we look at the achievements of this war, vis-a-vis Iran, vis-a-vis Hezbollah, the collapse of the Syrian regime, the weakening and degrading of Hamas, and when we look at the extraordinary unity of not just the Miluim, not just the reservists, but the society on the whole, I think we've seen a resilience, a power. We've also seen, what I touched on saying even before October 7th, a cultural power that unites Israel. And when I look, for example, at the United States of America, I see such deeper divisions. I go to weddings here. And by the way, we've been to so many weddings since October 7th. Usually you wait for a baby boom after the war. There's been a baby boom during the war. What better sign of optimism? What better sign of faith? You go to wedding after wedding, and there's always the ultra-Orthodox table. Now you can say, oh, they're separate. You can also say, they showed up. And I haven't been to one wedding where I don't see people with kippot and without kippot singing and dancing. Certainly when it's an army person, and these days an army person is anywhere from 18 to 58, they bring their tzevet, they bring their buddies, and they dance like maniacs. And sometimes kippot are flying off their head, and sometimes the kippot are awkwardly put on heads because it's a religious wedding. But you see religious and non-religious coming together. So I think even though there are a lot of difficult political divisions, the tribalism has been lowered.
And Israeli society really did come to the fore in response to October the 7th in so many ways. I mean, sadly, we've lost so many soldiers, many of whom volunteered or even flew back to Israel to fight. I heard today of a soldier, father of 8, so badly injured, he lost 2 legs and an arm. And his first waking thought after his coming out of coma was, where am I to fill in? There will be deep repercussions for bad and for good, won't there?
There's trauma. I have a psychologist friend who said, are you and your family and your friends dealing with PTSD? I said, PTSD? We haven't gotten to the P. We're not at post. We're deep in it. I acknowledge that. Nevertheless, we've seen heroism in a world of anti-heroes, in a world where we don't really have the same kind of dazzling view of our presidents, of our prime ministers, of our leaders, of our celebrities. We've seen real heroes who are just ordinary folk on October 7th, and as I say, every day since. But also when you talk about the stickers, look at the goodness. To me, the stickers are a kind of medley of Zionist values, a medley of Jewish values, a medley of liberal, democratic, humanistic values that show such values that, and these kids, they're 20, 22, 24, saying such unbelievable things and saying these are...
We should say these stickers are memorializing soldiers.
These are
soldiers
right.
all over the country.
And they're short. They're punchy slogans of do the right thing, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people live, better to smile than to frown. They take a very popular Jewish song, V'samachta b'chagecha, and you should rejoice in your holidays, and they say V'samachta b'chayecha, you should rejoice in your life. Unbelievable. And And the whole memorial project, and then, so you see the stickers, but what you've also seen, and again, it's coming up from deep trauma and deep heartbreak, is how many deaths are then memorialized with a scholarship, with a game night, with, I went to a place around a kibbutz where they've created a party space. And the dad who lost his 22-year-old son, Ben Mizrahi, the father says this, every time I hear a party, I kind of expect Ben to be coming through the door. So if we could create a space on the kibbutz where there's a party, it brings my son just a little closer to me. And you go, wow. So as many devastating moments as I've experienced in the last 2 years, I've also had so many wows. And the stickers are just the most dramatic example because they're everywhere. On bus stops, I'm in the Golan Heights on a hike in the middle of nowhere. And not only do I see a sticker, but I see a sticker of my son's good friend, Yosef Gedalia. And you go like, it's just, I've run out of skin for the goosebumps.
Let's talk about the global response. We spoke about, October the 8th and the cities around the world where we saw demonstrations essentially celebrating October the 7th. One of the front lines, of course, has been campus. What's your reflection on how that's transformed over the last 2 years, that space?
So it's interesting with campus. On the one hand, I still, and I've been, fighting what I call the academic intifada for over 24 years. Like so many of the standards like so many of the founders of StandWithUs, we saw this years ago during what they call the second intifada, the fight against the Oslo peace process and against any kind of a two-state solution. So I've been saying this for a long time. But to see in the church that I worshiped, academia, on October 7th, 8th, 9th, rape is resistance. Where are the feminists? To see a celebration of this kind of violence, to see American historians say they were exhilarated, it's stunning. And the fact that it got worse and worse and worse was even more stunning. Now, 2 years later, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that those people from October 7th haven't learned their lesson. Even some of them who were suspended, even those who were forced to say, my words were not my intent or whatever, many of them have doubled down and are more convinced than ever that they were right. And the worldwide pile-on against Israel and the use of horrible slur words like genocide and starvation, when Israel's brought in tons of food, when Israel's done everything possible to minimize civilian casualties and done a better job than the United States of America, is outrageous. So on the one hand, we've seen, and what's even worse is that we've almost seen this go into the woodwork, like termites, that now we don't have encampments anymore, but there's a kind of underlying disdain and disgust for not just the Israeli, but the Jew on campus, and that continues. Fortunately, and you have to say, thanks to StandWithUs, thanks to pushback, there also has been some kind of pushback. And we're seeing administrators discover that they have spines. We're seeing the government, now I don't want the government stepping in, but the government initiatives of Donald Trump, on the one hand, it's very important for me that we have university autonomy. On the other hand, when you say, okay, you want to wear a mask? Then show your ID. Because if you need a mask for medical reasons, that's fine. But if you're using a mask, A, because you don't want to lose your spot in law school, or B, because you want to intimidate students, that's not acceptable in our community. And so, as despairing as I am of the ongoing hatred and how regularized and popularized that hatred has been, I also have seen progress. And we have to work on the progress.
We've also seen some amazing young heroes standing up against that wave of anti-Semitism on campus, by the way, both Jewish and non-Jewish. So I wonder, what you would say about them, and also what your advice would be to young people who are stepping onto the campus this year.
When I travel around, and if I'm with a small group, before I give my talk, I say, let's go around, tell me your name, and give me a highlight or lowlight since October 7th. It's impressive how many young people on campus give me highlights rather than lowlights. I've discovered a new community. I've discovered real friends. I've discovered who my friends are and who my friends are not. I've discovered a sense of purpose. I've discovered a sense of mission. And again, StandWithUs was created the infrastructure before, but has gone way beyond our expectations. It's an amazing work. So on the one hand, there are amazing stories of young Jewish heroes and non-Jewish heroes who are saying, this is unacceptable. And on the other hand, there also is this despair among them, Why is it that I call this the broken covenant, that we were born into a world of the post-Auschwitz covenant. We were born into a world where we all knew that anti-Semitism wasn't just bad for the Jews, but it led to Hitler, which was bad for the world. And the fact that in democracies, on campuses, we're able to see this kind of mainstreaming of Jew hatred, this demonizing of Jews, this attack on Hillels, this attack on people wearing kippot, this attack on anybody who dares wear even a T-shirt that says Dina's bat mitzvah was awesome, is really problematic. My advice to students is twofold. One, don't let the anti-Semite define the Jew. The Jew defines the Jew. The Zionist defines the Zionist. Do not create a Zionism that's anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism. Celebrate. Have Taco Tuesdays. Have Shabbat dinners. Come together for October 7th vigils. But don't just cry. Also celebrate the Zionist reality and the Zionist victories. So number one is the internal conversation has to be much more positive, much stronger, much less defensive, much less reactive, much more proactive. We don't let them set the agenda. If we do, they win. That's piece one. Piece two is I don't think we've done a good enough job in broadening the coalition. I really believe in what I call the silenced majority. I believe there are many, many Americans, many, many Canadians, many, many Brits, many, many students are going, really? You want to burn the American flag and the Israeli flag? You want to throw paint on the White House? You want to disrupt traffic to Heathrow Airport on Christmas? Really? And I don't think we've done enough both to have those kind of conversations, just about decency, and to use the Israel space, even if you have criticisms, as a way to start learning what we've learned from Charlie Kirk on the right and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the left, that you can have a very strong partisan stance, but also think and learn with your rivals. And so I think we need to kind of make this a jujitsu movement, J-E-W, turn it from our defensiveness over anti-Semitism to finding allies, to joining the sproutings on campus and elsewhere of people who are saying, let's be decent, let's learn from one another, let's change the tone, and practically find allies. I think, for example, there are many Indian Americans and Indian Brits who understand the evil of jihad, who don't want it. I think, by the way, there are many Muslims who don't want to have Islamism. My attack isn't on Islam, my attack is on Islamism, on jihadism. And I don't think we've spent enough time trying to figure out how do we have a common conversation with that. And you know what? When we do that, we get out of despair. Similarly, we keep on calling it the Arab-Israeli conflict. I add an S. I call it the Arab-Israeli conflicts because we have peace with Egypt. We have peace with Jordan. We have the Abraham Accords. And once we do that, we do two things. One is we shrink the conflict. And two, we also magnify the glass and say, hey, wait a minute. Maybe we're not the problem. Maybe it's Hamas. Maybe it's the Palestinian leadership. Maybe it's Palestinian terrorism or rejectionism. It's not our fault.
Very well said. And I think, by the way, it's now called the Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
President Trump's press conference. In the days following October the 7th, I was speaking with our CEO and co-founder, Rosa Rothstein. She said, despair is not a strategy. And I think that's really important for us. It's been propelling us forward.
We're the people of hope. Hatikva.
Absolutely. It's a new year. We are at this anniversary period. We have many hopes. What's your hope for the Jewish people and for Israel going forward?
That we'll breathe. That we'll have a chance to stop being so reactive, stop being so defensive, and we'll have a chance to look around and see the miracles. See the miracles of the American Jewish community with all its challenges. See the miracles of the Australian Jewish community who I just visited with all its challenges. See the miracles of the British Jewish communities and see the miracles of Israel. And come, and don't just go to the Nova Festival, although you have to go there and you have to mourn. Don't just go to Kibbutz Kfar Aza to see what was destroyed. Come to Kibbutz Kfar Aza to roll up your sleeves and rebuild. We are the people of hope. We are the people not just of firefighting, but of tree planting. And let's make this year the year where we plant trees and we plant seeds of hope all over the world, because we are a nation that can show the other parts of the world, how to stand up strong, how to stand up proud, how to fight when necessary, but dream, rebuild, and be rebuilt always. That's Zionism 101.
Amen to that. Professor Gil Troy, thank you so much for your analysis today and for joining us and being a consistent friend of Stand With Us. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Great to see you.